The second act, still in it, is TV Unity!
From the docks to the spotlight. Roland Abante's journey reads like a headline you'd hesitate to believe, but that's precisely the story unfolding now. Born in Cebu, Abante's early life was not one of luxury or guarantees. He woke before dawn to join his family in fishing. The smell of salt, the sting of sea spray, and the constant uncertainty of catch were his everyday backdrop. By daybreak, he loaded nets or sorted fish, and at night, he stood before karaoke machines in small neighborhood bars, imagining a voice that strangers might one day care to hear. In his teenage years, he expanded his hustle. When fishing became less reliable, he took on courier gigs and ride-share work to support himself and his loved ones. Every extra peso mattered, and through that grind, he sang quietly, uncertainly, but persistently on any stage that would let him test a melody. His voice, weathered by early mornings and late nights, gradually developed a depth that no polished vocal coach could replicate. That tension between vulnerability and resonance became his hidden edge. Local circles began to notice. Videos of his street performances and small competitions spread, shared among friends and family. Some promos noted that his voice carried weight beyond his years, but those were just whispers until America's Got Talent came calling. The leap from Cebu docks and courier apps into a global audition stage was immense, and as with any steep climb, there were doubts, nerves, and stakes so high they might, as many stories go, break someone who isn't built for it. This section grounds us in the origin of a man whose daily battle shaped his instrument. Next, we'll see how those small, gritty moments set the stage for the audition that changed everything. When nerves met national ears. Roland Abante's audition day on America's Got Talent was a collision between dream and reality, and not everyone survives that crossover. On the morning of his audition, he reportedly paced backstage, hands trembling, heart racing. He had traveled thousands of miles across oceans and time zones, carrying hope heavier than his luggage. In the green room, he listened to other contestants talk, some confident, some desperate. None knew what the moment would demand of him. When his turn came, he stepped forward wearing simple clothes, no fanfare, just a man and a microphone. Heidi Klum asked, "Do you want a hug?" It was more than comfort. It was acknowledgement that nerves are real, and even dreamers need a moment of human connection before walking into judgment. Abante nodded. The moment passed. The lights, the cameras, the audience, and then he sang. He began with a soft, tentative phrase. The house quieted. He wore the weight of life in that opening line. Judges leaned forward, listeners held breath. Gradually, the performance grew, a swell of emotion and control. When he reached the chorus, it felt less like singing and more like confession. Judges exchanged expressions, as if weighing not only pitch but presence. When the final note hung, silence followed, and then came the revelation: 4 yes votes. What many saw as surprise, some saw prescience. His voice had demanded attention. That moment crystallized something rare, the shift from hopeful to urgent contender. The next section will reveal how Abante's song choices amplified that moment and turned it into cultural shockwaves. A song choice that dared the impossible. Choosing a song on a global talent stage is more than selection, it's inevitability. Roland Abante elected to perform When a Man Loves a Woman, a song etched into collective memory. It's not a safe pick. It demands depth, phrasing, vulnerability, and stamina. Many performers avoid it. Abante embraced it. That choice became a statement before he sang the first line. From the very start, his voice carried layers: tension and release, rawness and control, falter and fidelity. He didn't try to mimic prior greats. He let his lived experience color every syllable. The grain in his voice caught the mic just enough to humanize the polish. As he climbed the melody, emotionally charged swells became inevitable rather than forced. And when the final high lines arrived, he held them bare, sustained, letting room and silence become partners in his performance. The judges, seasoned in expectation and elimination, reacted not just to technical execution, but to what they felt behind the voice. The shock came not only from hearing someone like Abante sing a classic so well, but from realizing the stage had long undervalued voices forged in labor, grit, and survival. Social media erupted. Within hours, clips of his performance circulated widely. Conversations began about talent, opportunity, representation. That reaction proved the point. The performance was a turning point not just for Abante, but for the audience's expectations. Now, in the next section, we will see how his return to the spotlight put a bigger bet on his authenticity and nearly broke the game. Betting everything on the comeback. Returning in the AGT qualifiers, Roland Abante didn't retreat to safety, he advanced. He chose I Will Always Love You, a song so iconic it terrifies many singers. It's a test: breath control, vocal dynamics, emotional reach. If he succeeded, he'd validate his audition. If he faltered, he risked being dismissed as a one-hit moment. On stage, he paced his delivery. The first verses were intimate, warm, reflective. The audience leaned in. As the arrangement swelled, his voice followed, not by force but by earned control. The high belt wasn't a scream, it was a conversation with the mic, with the room, with expectation itself. When the final chorus soared, it felt earned. Judges cheered, standing ovations followed. Clips of that return performance flooded feeds, media highlights, and fan pages. But AGT is not a popularity contest alone. Advancing depends on votes, judges' choices, and show mechanics. Despite the acclaim, elimination remained possible. Nonetheless, Abante's qualifiers moment reframed the conversation. Is AGT about perfect singers or unforgettable ones? His performance leaned toward the latter. Viewers and commentators debated whether he'd been shortchanged by the system. What comes next is where show mechanics met public will, and where the narrative got messy. When applause wasn't enough. Even when the crowd rises, the scoreboard doesn't bend. After that electrifying qualifiers round, Abante's journey hit a crossroads. Live television elimination, unforgiving, mechanical, sometimes disconnected from the room's energy. Despite 2 standing ovations, weeks of buzz, and media acclaim, the votes that week didn't carry him forward. Headlines talked about who advanced, fans talked about who they lost. Social media backlash fanned over perceived undervaluing of authenticity. Some alleged that genre or background factored in decisions, not overt accusations, but a murmur of structural imbalance. Abante himself released no bitter statement. His public posture remained dignity over grievance. That tension between applause and advancement became central to his narrative. Viewers realized AGT isn't always about talent alone. It's about timing, rules, and sometimes luck. But the setback didn't erase what had already been built. And in that gap between elimination and resurrection lies the heart of his real climb. The next section explores how Abante took the momentum beyond TV's borders into global presence. The stage that never ends. Roland Abante's story didn't stop when AGT lights dimmed, it expanded. After leaving the competition, he was booked in venues, and most tellingly in community centers, diaspora events, festivals of Filipino pride. He sang for audiences who saw pieces of themselves in that arc. Someone breaking from struggle, someone holding their voice despite the noise. Promoters in US states with large Filipino communities noticed. Concerts were announced. Ticket sales followed. Social media engagement shifted. Fans shared cover videos, reaction clips, and testimonials of how his voice hearts raw truths. Local media picked up the story. He was quoted in press features with headlines about a Filipino fisherman turned global singer. What makes this era compelling is that his journey started with labor, not spotlight. The same hands that hauled fish now hold microphones in larger rooms. The same voice that sang to small karaoke crowds now echoes across continents. His trajectory became proof that success isn't an exit, it's an expansion. Today, Roland's name carries weight not just as a contestant, but as a brand. Artist who rose from working life, vocalist forged by struggle, bridge between small towns and big stages. And for all who watched, his rise invites a question. Do we define success by trophies, or by whether your voice finds ears when it's overdue to be heard? Viral without a crown, the global echo that followed. Sometimes the real performance begins after the cameras stop rolling. That seems to be the case for Roland Abante. Although his time on America's Got Talent concluded before the finals, his story didn't dim, it detonated. The days following his elimination saw an unexpected turn. His audition clip and qualifiers performance continued to gain millions of views across YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. International viewers, particularly from Southeast Asia, flooded the comment sections. Fans didn't just admire the singing, they felt it. They recognized the fatigue in his eyes, the quiet gratitude in his voice, the way he paused before each note like someone who knew what it cost to arrive there. This phenomenon wasn't merely fandom, it was resonance. In the Philippines, media outlets amplified his story. Tagalog news headlines called him the pride of Cebu. Radio shows replayed his performances. Even local barangays organized tribute events, some screening his audition in gymnasiums and basketball courts. Social media artists created portrait illustrations. Meanwhile, overseas Filipino communities from California to Dubai reached out to promoters, asking for Bunot to perform. This was not just a singer anymore, it was a cultural icon being born in real time, outside of official crowns or talent show trophies. Several interviews began surfacing post-act, in which Roland humbly reflected on his journey. He never expressed bitterness over his elimination. Instead, he emphasized the value of experience, the joy of standing on the same stage as so many global talents, and the deep sense of pride in representing his homeland. He repeatedly credited his supporters, using phrases like, "I'm only here because they carried me." His grace under pressure, coupled with his working-class humility, only added to the magnetism. But what became most apparent was this. Roland's appeal wasn't constructed, it was organic. No PR team, no viral gimmick. His rise came from emotional clarity, and that authenticity is rare in an entertainment cycle dominated by branding, filters, and manufactured drama. The audience kept listening, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to believe that someone like Roland could make it, not just once, but permanently. And in the next section, we'll report on the growing signs that this man's rise is no longer just a moment. It may be something much bigger. Beyond fame, a movement rooted in grit and grace. If Roland Abante's path ended on a brightly lit AGT stage, this would already be a memorable story. But what's happening now goes beyond personal success, becoming a quiet movement. Music producers and vocal coaches have begun analyzing his performances on social media, pointing out how his untrained yet emotionally intuitive voice challenges the traditional route to performance mastery. He doesn't sing to impress, one producer noted in a breakdown video. He sings to release. Cultural analysts have chimed in too, discussing how Roland's narrative reflects the broader story of the Filipino worker abroad, resilient, passionate, under-recognized. In an era where image often overtakes substance, here is a man who flips that formula entirely. Limited resources, modest presentation, but limitless emotional range. There's talk now, not just among fans, but also among promoters and production teams, about recording opportunities, concert tour, and community engagements with Roland at the center. But perhaps most powerful is the ripple effect he's created among everyday people. Teachers play his audition in classrooms to inspire students. Jeepney drivers blast his songs in the early morning traffic. Fishermen, the community he once belonged to, have reportedly said, "He gives us reason to sing again." That emotional imprint is more lasting than most trophies or chart toppers. What does Roland Abante symbolize now? For some, he's a reminder that talent isn't always born in studios. It's shaped in small rooms, hard jobs, and ordinary struggles. For others, he represents the dream deferred but not denied. And for many, especially the unseen and unheard, he is proof that one voice, sincere and unshaken, can echo far beyond its expected range. In journalistic terms, we would say this is still a developing story. But for now, one fact is undeniable. Roland Abante is no longer just the man who sang his heart out on America's Got Talent. He is now the man whose voice, forged in labor and lifted by hope, is being heard across oceans. Not because he demanded it, but because he earned it.